You know, when it comes to food plots, there's a good way of doing things, bad way of doing things, and a better way of doing things. And typically the better way of doing things, you end up saving money not only on the front end, but also, you know, at the end of the game with better results. And what this refers to in this video is the shotgun effect versus granular fertilizer feeding plants. You know, foliar feeding, which is the shotgun effect, and granular feeding. And not that granular feeding fertilizer is bad, because it's needed. But the problem is, if you have poor soil, low cation exchange in the soil, your granular fertilizer is not going to be utilized properly, especially if you have acidic soil. Because you got to think, different soils, some soils with a high cation exchange, high organic matter value in the soil, it's going to be able to hold moisture better. It's going to be able to hold nutrients better. If you don't have that good soil, you have that poor soil, and all those nutrients run through that soil and they just dissipate. And then you have, you know, a lack of a food plot. So with granular feeding, the number, you know, typically whatever, you know, 300-400 pounds per acre, that number is so high because you have different soils. Not all that fertilizer is going to be utilized by that plant. So what we typically do, and what I've started doing 5 years ago, is fertilizer is not cheap, granular fertilizer. But what I started doing years ago is, according to your soil sample, if it says 300 pounds of triple 19 per acre, I'll cut that fertilizer in half, let the plant establish, and then come back in and foliar feed. And think of it this way, is another reason why fertilizer, you know, the number is so high, you know, poundage per acre, is because when a lot of people seed, you know, say you put out 50 pounds of seed on an acre. Well, you got a seed here, seed here, seed here, seed here. Well, when you come back and granular fertilize, okay, you got a pebble here, a pebble here, pebble here, pebble here. That pebble may be 6, 12, 18, 24 inches away from that seed. So once that fertilizer dissolves, that seed is nowhere near that plant or fertilizer, you know, granular fertilizer. And you may have an N over here, a P over here, a K over here, and it's not all next to that seed. So it's scattered out. So then when that plant grows, it's lacking. It could be lacking P. It could be lacking N. It could be lacking K. So, and that's, you know, it's a hard thing to say, because yeah, that fertilizer is going to dissolve. It's going to dissipate through the soil. But a lot of times it could run through that soil very fast. It's not near the plant. You know, when that plant establishes, grows a root system, it's going to branch out. Yeah, this is an extreme issue. But a lot of people don't use enough fertilizer to begin with, granular, because a lot of people don't realize that 50-pound bag actually goes by percentage. Just because it says triple 19 doesn't mean it's 19 pounds of N, 19 pounds of K, 19 pounds of P. You know, it's not the case, because it goes by percentages. So yeah, granular feeding is important to get those plants off the ground, to get them started. And another misconception is clover. You know, a lot of people are scared to put out nitrogen on clover because they say, oh, you know, clover produces its own nitrogen. It does, but it takes a long time for that clover to produce nitrogen. Just because it's a seed doesn't mean that it produces nitrogen right off the bat. That clover actually has to produce nodules, which takes months for that plant to create nodules to create its own nitrogen. So that's a huge misconception on clover plots, is that clover produces nitrogen. Yeah, it does, but a bare seed that hasn't established yet and created nodules doesn't produce its own nitrogen. So all plants, all living things need nitrogen, you know. So we have to give that nitrogen to that clover, or to become a plant, create nodules, release nitrogen. So we cut that granular feeding in half, and then once that plant establishes 4, 6, 8, 10 inches tall, whatever, we come back in and foliar feed that plant. And it's the shotgun effect, because you have all those micronutrients. You got the sticker, you got the surfactant you can mix, which is all micronutrients. You also mix in the fertilizer, NPK, which is a 5-13-8. You mix that all in there and it becomes the shotgun effect. Everything in one. You come back through at a rate of 25 to 30 gallons per acre, you know, when the plants are 6, 8, 10, 12 inches tall. You come back through and you foliar feed that food plot, and that way nothing's wasted. It's eco-friendly. You don't get runoff into the waterways. The plant uses that 100% and makes it available to that plant to use. So instead of throwing that extra money, you know, in the dirt where not all you get runoff, especially if you're on a hillside, all that fertilizer is going to run to the bottom. It makes it available to that plant 100%. So you're saving up front by not putting out the 300 pounds per acre of granular. You're saving that extra money. You're coming back in to buy micros or fertilizer or both. So sometimes you're spending the same amount of money, but most times you're spending less money. But at the end result, you have a better, more nutritious, more palatable food plot. It's greener, it's fuller, it's more lush. You get bigger leaves, especially if you're spraying perennials each year. You know, the clover, come back in the spring, you get bigger leaves, you get more palatable, higher in proteins. Because that's another issue, is people think because that clover bag says 30% protein that you just throw it out there and it becomes 30% protein, and nothing could be further from the truth. Because all that, that clover seed has a potential to be 30% protein, but if you're not giving it 100% of the nutrients that it needs through the soil, it's never going to be 30% protein. So it's just a huge misconception. They put that on there, 30% protein, because it gives people something, to think about and hope. And, in their mind, they're thinking, oh, wow, I'm giving these animals 30% protein, when in reality, they're not, because the majority of people aren't doing soil samples, and they're doing it, in a lazy manner, and you end up with a poor result. So if you're not going to put full effort into a food plot, why even bother? It's just with anything, you get out of it what you put into it in life, food plots, deer hunt, anything. Yeah, there's sometimes you could get lucky. Majority of times, though, if you don't put that extra work into it, you're going to get poor results. That's why there's a new way of doing things. Not that the old way is bad, but it's just a new way of doing things, and cutting that cost of granular feeding up front. Come back in, foliar feed. You end up with a way better end result.